Today we're hiking at Cooper's Rock State Forest near Morgantown, West Virginia, and this is one of our favorite places to visit. And there's a lot of really popular destinations here at Cooper's Rock. They have tons of trails that you can explore. The Overlook and Ravens Rock Overlook are quite popular, but we're going to be exploring a less traversed trail called the Hemlock Trail, and this trail is about 1.5 miles and loops around once. It's just right off one of the roads, and it walks by a couple of points of interest, including Laurel Run Stream and some virgin hemlock groves. So while we will be walking by some older trees, a lot of the forests here were clear-cut previously, so the forests are fairly young, and you do get younger trees and smaller trees like these little witch hazels. And then we have a little grove of witch hazels behind us, and they're easily identifiable by these broad leaves with the sort of bumpy edges, and they have a couple of trunks that are all kind of grouped together. And witch hazel is still used for medicinal purposes, so you might see it like in your medicine cabinet at some point, but it's also a really common plant that you can find in the forest. So as you're hiking through the woods in like western Pennsylvania and West Virginia, you might see these low-growing bushes that have either really bright pink or purple flowers, and these are the rhododendron plant, which is actually the state flower of West Virginia. And surprisingly, you might see these plants growing and blooming in people's yards at certain times of the year, but then they might not be blooming in the woods at certain times of the year. And that's because depending on where they're located, they can bloom anywhere between March and even well into the fall. So here's a really special flower you might see when you're hiking in the forest, maybe in like the late spring, early summer. This is the flower of the tulip poplar, and the tulip poplar has these really unique leaves that people think kind of look like the flower of a tulip, but its flower is quite large, and it really attracts a lot of insects and pollinators, and you can often find even just the little petals. The petals, they sort of look like they have little hearts on them. They're really cute. But yeah, it's a really beautiful flower. It almost looks like something you should be seeing in the tropics or something like that. But no, this is a deciduous tree that you can find in the Appalachians. So the Hemlock Trail is a loop, and we're starting to round the corner of the loop and head more downhill. We're going to be walking by Laurel Run, and as we walk down the hill, we start to see the trees change. So here is where we start to see more of the hemlock trees. Higher up on the hill, we're seeing more of like the oaks and maples, beeches, the tulip poplars we saw earlier, but now we're starting to see more of the hemlocks because they really love the water. So we've made it to the old growth hemlock grove, and some of these hemlock trees are upwards of 300 years old. These trees are really important for the local environment, and they're also quite under threat. There's an invasive species called the hemlock woolly adelgid, which has been destroying hemlocks since the 1950s. And so it's really important that naturalists and scientists monitor the hemlocks that are still around and make sure that the pest isn't there. And so you sometimes see hemlocks with little tags on them for maybe they're part of a study or something like that. So it's really important that these old growth forests are protected because they provide a lot for the environment, especially since forests have been clear cut in previous centuries. Having older trees is really important for the habitats and ecosystems. So the hemlock is a type of evergreen tree, and so you can identify them in a couple of ways. You can look at the needles. The hemlock needles tend to be very small and kind of soft to the touch, and you can also look at their bark as well. Hemlock trees tend to have this real reddish color to them, and that has to do with the tannins that are in the bark. And so this combination of the reddish bark, small, soft leaves are a great way to help identify the hemlock tree. So in addition to the large old growth trees, we also see a lot of young hemlock trees as well. And these guys face quite a few obstacles in addition to invasive species like the hemlock woolly adelgid. They face challenges like habitat loss and climate change. And so hopefully we can come back decades, centuries from now and these guys are still around and going strong. So we just had a really special wildlife encounter on our walk, and we just saw a black rat snake. So rat snakes are really interesting because they have very strong muscles that allow them to climb trees. This is called being arboreal. So it was really cool because we were actually able to see it climb the tree. He's using the grooves in the bark to attach itself into the tree. We finished our hike on the Hemlock Trail, and now we are here at the Henry Clay Furnace Trail. This trail gets its name because of the Henry Clay furnace that is still on the property. Back in the 19th century, there was actually an iron works here. So we kind of have to imagine what it would be like for a lot of these trees here to be cleared and for there to actually be a small village back in the mountains where the ironworks were located. And so there were people that lived here, there was a church, there was a school, and several other buildings related to the ironworks. Now the only thing that remains is the large stone furnace, which we're going to go see. So we made it to the furnace, and it's really crazy to think, as we're walking about the half mile into here, that all of this probably would have been cleared out because they needed the wood, the water, and the natural resources that were already here to operate the iron furnace. So it's kind of crazy to see that how the forest has changed since then, and now we have like all this beautiful lush greenery, and at one point in time all of this probably would have been gone. At one point there would have been an entire community here, and today all that we can see that's left is the iron furnace. It's really cool to see how like nature has kind of started to reclaim the furnace, even though it's one of the remaining things left from the community. There's all this moss on the sides, there's like trees growing in and out. It's just really cool to see how like this ruin has just kind of remained over the years. Feels like damp and cold. Like so in addition to seeing the iron furnace that we just looked at, you can kind of tell that there was some type of industry around here, because even some of the gravel that you see, like normal rocks don't have this like shiny porous texture to it, but it's likely that this was probably some type of remnant from the iron forging. Today was a really fun day exploring 2 different trails at Cooper's Rock State Forest. So if you're ever in West Virginia and have the chance to visit, definitely stop by. There's a lot of fun things to do here. So thanks for watching today's video, and we hope to see you next time. Bye!